You are 42 years old, and for the first time in your life, money arrives while you're asleep. Not because you won the lottery, not because you sold a business, not because you inherited wealth. The money appears for a much quieter reason, a reason so ordinary that most people completely overlook it. For years, you've been building something nobody could see. Month after month, year after year. While everyone else focused on higher salaries, bigger houses, and a more expensive lifestyle, you were building something different. A machine. A machine that slowly begins buying back pieces of your time. Hi, I'm Kaya, and today, I'm going to show you how much money you actually need invested to live off dividends in Japan, and why the number itself is far less important than the habit that makes it possible. Because most people believe financial freedom begins when they finally have enough money. The truth is very different. Financial freedom begins the moment you stop depending entirely on your next paycheck. Our story starts in Tokyo. Monday morning. The train is packed. Thousands of people stand shoulder to shoulder on their way to work. Some look exhausted. Some stare at their phones. Others are already thinking about deadlines waiting for them at the office. And among them is me, Kaya, 42 years old, married, one daughter. A normal income. Nothing extraordinary. If you passed me on the street, you would never assume I was financially independent. I don't drive a luxury car. I don't wear expensive watches. I rarely talk about money. But this morning is different. While I was asleep, my investments generated roughly $100. Not enough to retire. Not enough to quit my job. But enough to remind me that a portion of my income no longer depends on my time. 20 years ago, that number was zero. And this is where most people misunderstand dividend investing. They think the goal is income. The real goal is freedom. Freedom arrives slowly. The first dividend payment doesn't buy freedom. It buys belief. Years ago, I was exactly where many people watching this video are today. Confused, overwhelmed, unsure where to start. Every financial expert seemed to have a different answer. Growth stocks, real estate, cryptocurrency, options trading, high-yield dividend funds. Every strategy promised wealth, every strategy promised opportunity, and every strategy sounded urgent. But eventually, I noticed something interesting. The people who talk the most about money often change strategies every year. The people quietly building wealth rarely said anything at all. So I chose simplicity. Every month, I invested a fixed amount into diversified dividend-producing investments. Not because it was exciting, because it was sustainable. Sometimes the market went up, sometimes it crashed. Sometimes I felt brilliant, sometimes I felt completely foolish. But the money kept flowing into the account. For a long time, none of it felt rewarding. And that's the part nobody talks about. People imagine financial freedom. They imagine the ending. The dividends, the freedom, the passive income. What they never imagine are the years in between, the years when discipline remains invisible. At age 34, I watched coworkers upgrade their lifestyles. New cars, luxury vacations, designer brands, expensive restaurants. Their lives looked exciting. My life looked ordinary. But I kept going. In Japan, there is an old lesson hidden in nature. The strongest bamboo isn't the one that grows the fastest. It's the one that bends during the storm and remains standing afterward. Investing works the same way. The people who build wealth are rarely the ones who predict everything correctly. More often, they're the people who remain consistent while everyone else reacts emotionally. 10 years pass. My portfolio reaches approximately $123,000. The dividends are still relatively small. Nothing spectacular, nothing life-changing. And this is exactly where many people quit. Because progress still feels invisible. Human beings want immediate rewards. We want proof. We want confirmation. But compounding works in silence. For years, it whispers. Only later does it begin to speak. In Osaka, there's a family-owned restaurant that has existed for more than 50 years. The menu barely changes. The owners rarely advertise. Nothing about the business seems impressive. Yet it survives every year. And it grows every year. Not because of dramatic innovation, but because of consistency. Dividend investing follows the same principle. Most people chase excitement. Wealth is often built through repetition. By age 40, something begins to change. The portfolio crosses roughly $170,000. Now the dividends feel different. Not because the yield changed, but because their impact changed. The payments begin covering small expenses, electricity, insurance, groceries, not everything, but enough to create psychological relief, and relief changes everything. For the first time, I realized something important. Financial freedom is not a destination, it's a process. Most people imagine freedom as one giant moment, one huge number, one finish line. But eventually, part of your life becomes supported by assets instead of labor. At age 47, the numbers slowly begin changing the way I see the world. The dividends no longer feel symbolic, they feel useful. The portfolio now generates enough income to cover a meaningful portion of my monthly expenses. Financial freedom doesn't arrive like lightning. It arrives like a sunrise. The dividends improved my options, and options are different. A higher salary increases your spending power. Assets increase your freedom. One changes your standard of living. The other changes your relationship with time. That realization changes everything. Because I finally understand that dividends were never really about money. They were about reducing dependence. So how much money do you actually need invested to live off dividends in Japan? The answer depends entirely on your lifestyle. A modest lifestyle outside major cities may require around $1,560 per month. A comfortable lifestyle in Tokyo may require closer to $2,800 per month. Assuming a dividend yield between 3.4% and 4.3%, you would generally need around $500,000 invested to generate approximately $1,560 per month. For many people, those numbers sound impossible, and that's exactly why they never begin. They focus on the mountain and ignore the path. But nobody builds wealth all at once. It is built through repeated behavior, repeated over decades. By age 50, work becomes optional. Pay attention to that word. Optional. Not impossible. Optional. That distinction matters. Because financial freedom isn't about never working again. It's about having the choice. Working because you want to, not because you have to. One evening in Kyoto, I walk past a small tea house. Outside sits an elderly man. Simple clothes, simple meal, simple life. Nothing about him appears wealthy, yet he radiates a calmness that is impossible to ignore. For a moment, I wonder how long it took to build that kind of peace. Then I realized something. The peace didn't come from the money. The money came from the habits. The habits created the freedom, and the freedom created the peace, which is why the real question isn't, how much money do I need invested? The better question is, what kind of person am I becoming while I build it? Because one day, your dividends may pay your rent, they may pay your groceries, they may even replace your salary. But long before they do any of those things, they'll teach you something far more valuable: patience, consistency, discipline, and a relationship with time that most people never develop. And in the end, those lessons may be worth even more than the money itself.